felt like he was on the outside looking in, and discovered a way to connect with them emotionally through fantasy. Just thinking about them and thinking about being near them and sexualizing that. And that was a way for me to resolve that need to connect with this group of men.
And then developmentally tend to move into a relationship. So they may have had same-sex behavior early on. They may later label themselves privately and then publicly, and then they pursue more of an ongoing relationship with someone of the same sex.
The girl that I was relating to for those 10 years, we made a marriage vow.
And that relationship lasted for several years.
My first relationship was 8 years long. It was all through high school and all through college.
Not everyone develops attractions for the same sex in the same way. Environmental differences and childhood events can also lead to different pathways to same-sex attraction.
Yes, I was 21 then. I was living with a woman. I had moved in with her when I was 19, and we were just friends. At that time, there was no sexual relationship then. And I started developing feelings for her and just for same-sex attractions in general.
When this girl approached me to kiss me, my mother was at work and we were at home alone together. I had really two reactions, one right on the heels of the other. First was revulsion when she kissed me, then attraction.
So the way I would really think about this conceptually is that there is a weighted interaction of many different factors, meaning that factors like genetics or prenatal hormonal mechanisms or parent-child relationships or childhood sexual abuse or disinhibition about sexual relationships.
Because the factors involved in creating sexual feelings are complex and individual, many people in our society mistakenly look for simple categories and simple explanations.
And so what I tend to do is I make a three-tier distinction between experiences of same-sex attraction, a homosexual orientation, and a gay identity. And what happens in our culture today is that these three things that ought to be distinct are collapsed into one thing, so that experiences of same-sex attraction are automatically taken to mean the person is gay. And all they've got to do is realize that and come to accept who they really are as a person.
There's such a huge drive to define yourself when you're growing up, and especially when you're around, 13, 14, 15. You really want to know who you are, and you want to be sure of that. And it's almost like life or death, And you look around you, and everyone seems to have a little assuredness where they know where they belong. I know. I'm a cheerleader. I'm a football player. I'm, the straight A student. And everyone, finds they solidify their identity. And I was dying for that. I needed that.
They have the experiences of same-sex attraction, but they have to make meaning out of what those attractions signal about them as a person. So in comparison, the people who later integrate those into a gay identity say, this signals who I truly am. The group who disidentifies tends to say, there's something wrong about me or something different about me, or this is a passing phase was a common thing that we saw in our research. They did not tend to say, these signal who I truly am as a person.
I started really looking at homosexuality being a term I could identify with. And I started reading more about it and reading about stories of others who had gone before me and, had adopted a gay identity.
Even if people develop same-sex attractions through many different life experiences, there remains an open question about whether or not those attractions are changeable. As we have seen, many people think of these feelings as being a major part of their identity. Can change in these feelings and attractions happen once they are established?
Well, within the mental health profession, there's almost a unanimous consensus that homosexual orientation is pretty fixed. And that when you hear of a person who says that they were gay and they've become ex-gay, that if you really interview them, they will acknowledge that the change is really in the way they view themselves, but their actual feelings and fantasies have not really changed. And that's the accepted view, and I kind of accepted that view.
Clearly, the idea of change is controversial. One highly esteemed psychiatrist that now believes change is possible was once skeptical about the possibility that people could reorient their sexual feelings. Dr. Robert Spitzer of Columbia University recently conducted research to address the question of sexual orientation change from gay to straight. Dr. Spitzer is well known in the mental health community for his involvement in the American Psychiatric Association's decision to drop homosexuality from its list of mental disorders in 1973.
And I had an interesting experience. I was at the American Psychiatric Association annual meeting several years ago, and it was picketed by a group of people who were ex-gay, and they were very unhappy with the American Psychiatric Association. And I started talking to one of them, and he told me how he had changed. He was a very religious person, and religion had been an important part of his change. And it occurred to me, gee, could it really be that it was not as fixed as everybody thought?
Dr. Spitzer became quite curious about sexual orientation change and decided to explore the issue further.
But in the meantime, I decided I could do a study of it. My own research work is in structured interviews and assessment, so I thought it was something that I could do.
Dr. Spitzer contacted several mental health professionals who believed change was possible in order to enlist participants for the study. He remained cautiously skeptical.
But as soon as I spoke to a few of the people, it seemed pretty obvious to me that these were people who gave a very credible story of how they had changed. So the real purpose was to see whether it was true that essentially no one could change. Now, it was not a study of how often people can make that change, but it was a study of whether there are some people who can make a change in more than just how they view themselves, but also in their fantasy and their arousal.
When asked, Dr. Spitzer's research participants disclosed their frustration with the mental health professions.
That's another interesting thing. Many of the subjects reported that they had gone to mental health professionals and were told, just, accept it, there's no way to change. And they were not satisfied with that and were very depressed, thinking that they could not, change.
At the time, I was looking for somebody to tell me that I didn't have to go down that road, that there was hope in resolving my feelings. And but later on, this was before I actually was in any kind of homosexual relationship. This is when I was struggling with the feeling still. And I just accepted what they told me and just really thought I was born that way and there was no hope otherwise.
The majority of subjects reported moderate to severe depression before they went into therapy, and a marked change. Very few were depressed when we saw them.
So with the growing evidence of the benefit of counseling for those seeking change, will the mental health professions reevaluate their official skepticism toward those who view themselves as ex-gay? Dr. Spitzer is not optimistic.
Well, I think they should. They will not be. It's not going to happen. In the near future, there's no way it's going to happen. I think the only issue is whether it goes beyond the position statements, whether they go to, saying it's an ethical violation to do this kind of therapy. But those position statements are not going to change. There's a gay activist group that's very strong and very vocal and recognized officially by the American Psychiatric Association. There's nobody to give the other viewpoint. There may be a few people who believe it, but they don't talk. Now, I do have to say that one of the concerns that people who have criticized, the study's been criticized severely by many people, particularly gay activists who apparently feel many quite threatened by it. I think they have the feeling that in order for them to get their civil rights, it's helpful to them if they can present the view that once you're homosexual, it can never change, which may actually, they may be right, that politically it does help them, but it may not be scientifically correct.
It is this tension between gay political objectives and the reality of change that creates the intense controversy surrounding people who change from gay to straight. One such person is Noé Gutierrez. He remembers well when he came out as a gay man.
I was very angry when I came out. I came out of the closet. I was very angry. I was angry about how long I had felt isolated and unaccepted and different. And now I felt empowered by knowing, I belong to some class of people.
After coming out to family, Noé began to become more comfortable with his identification as a gay man.
And I guess I started really shaping my life around the decision that I had made to adopt a gay identity until it became my entire life. From the people I talked to the things I believed in, to the books I read, to the music I listened to the things I liked. Suddenly my tastes were being changed.